Hey guys, Dan, Warpaint JKU. It's finally time to talk about Maple Leaf and this beautiful leaf spring JKU build that we did on a budget, right? 1 tons, Dana 60, 14 bolt, leaf springs set up for tons of travel, and compare it to what the cost was on Warpaint with the same axles, but 3-link long arms and using coil springs. You might be surprised with today's numbers and inflation, so stick around and check it out. All right guys, so here we are. We're on a park road at Hidden Falls Adventure Park in Marble Falls, Texas. And we are on our way over to a pretty cool trail called North Peak because it's a real nice, easy, flat, very gradual trail that has some big drainage cutouts that over time have become, 2-3 feet deep. So there it is, right? North Peak's kind of cool because it's got this kind of stuff in here, can kind of test out your flex and that kind of thing. So this is a really good first flex here for Maple Leaf. All right, kind of off camber. Those leaf springs, nothing really crazy. All right, here, hang on a second. Let's have you turn driver back straight up, but turn driver and then just back up. I'll tell you when to stop. All the way driver. Keep going back, 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 back. Right there, stop. Hop out and let's take a look at this sucker because you are flexed out. Not totally flexed out, but you are flexed out. You're stuffed, clearing in the front of the tire, right? You're not fully stuffed. There's still room to go, so we're gonna have to trim some in the front for sure. We're gonna have to trim a little bit in the rear. We are rubbing just a tad bit right here with that shackle now that we're flexing out this bushing, right? We're rubbing a tiny bit. So if we put another spacer in there, we'll be fine, right? This side, look at the springs, got that nice negative arch. I would say you're about stuffed because that leaf spring in the front up there by your exhaust is basically touching the frame, right? So this side over here, we're kind of flexed the other way a little bit, but everything's clearing well. It's hanging down, right? So in the rear, everything's good.
Body's not hitting.
And you're basically stuffed. Yep, shock's not hitting. It's close.
I'm clear though.
It's close, but you're clear, right? Everything's working. Everything's working really good. And then our front up here is obviously really flexed out. The drag link, which we had to design to go above the high steer arm and over the spring, is clearing by plenty. The ram and everything clears. Your spring looks really good, negative arched by quite a bit, right? We go back over here. We are definitely in a negative arch situation. Shock is completely compressed. So you're pretty much as stuffed as you're gonna get with those long down travel shocks in the front. But you're not fully drooped on this side yet. This side's got more. And I like the drive shaft angle, right?
What were you doing there, Warpaint?
Where there's smoke, there's fire. So part of testing this thing out, right, and flexing it out, we got to get in here and do a little self-clearancing. All right, and we're not as clear as I thought we were, but sometimes you got to shave the old big girls. Just saying, man. Right?
Oh man.
Oh
yeah.
Look at that.
Oh, lots of clearance.
Well, I mean, if only this was rubbing on the outside, that should be clear enough, maybe. Clear. I think you're gonna have to get in here one day with this and kind of finish knocking the rest of it at least a little further in, clean it up. We'll hit it with a nice flap wheel, make it look good.
Yep.
But for right now, for testing purposes, we'll see if it clears. We'll figure it out. So first things first, what did we do to this rig, right? To find out what the total cost is. Well, we put new 40-inch tires on it, okay? They're the Pro Comp Extreme MT2. We put new Raceline Monster bead locks, okay? We made the tubing for the steering. We put new 14-inch travel Bilstein shocks and springs, okay, out of an 85 Jeep Grand Wagoneer. And they are the rear springs on all four corners. We bought a bunch of spring brackets, okay, from various places, TMR high steer arms. I made the bumper with some steel, and that was important because we had to weld the brackets and stuff onto tubing on the front end to make it work. So all of that, all those costs are included in this build, right? Now, in the front, it does have an air locker. We'll go over the cost of that in just a minute. We obviously had to swap out for new drive shafts. In the rear, we had to do new spring perches in the rear, obviously on the axle, as well as for the upper part of the spring off the frame. I chopped the rear of the frame off, more steel there, more shackles, some nuts and bolts. We did wind up putting a truss on it, okay, from Artec Industries. Not 100% necessary, but we shaved it on a budget by just doing a 13-bolt shave cover. Now, the rear diff is also going to be a Yukon Grizzly auto locker, right? So it's not an air locker, it's not even an e-locker. Makes it a little bit more affordable, knocks about 500 bucks off the total build of the rig. I re-geared the axles myself. If you follow along with the build series, you can see how to do that there. It's very, very simple. But this rig over here, Warpaint, it's built very much in a similar way, but different. Let's talk about it. Now, Warpaint was built with the same 17-inch Raceline Monster bead locks, 40-inch tires, just like Maple Leaf over here, but Yokohama's. Made the steering the same way, same steering ram, same high steer arms. Didn't have to put a bumper on it because, right, there was no shackle mount. It doesn't have anything to do with our suspension, so didn't have to do that. Coil springs, had to put different coil springs in it to keep the ride height where I wanted it, right, with the size of the truss. We had to do a truss. Didn't have to do that on the other rig. We also had to do long arms, right, 3-link long arms in the front and the rear. Drive shafts, wheels and tires, the axles, the re-gear, the lockers, all that stuff, right, you're going to be doing no matter what, okay? I bought new coil springs, we bought new leaf springs. I bought new shocks, he bought new shocks, right? So a lot of those things are similar, but we're going to get down to the actual cost right now. You're going to see me sometimes looking at my phone here because there's a lot of numbers I got to throw out at you. $2,600 for tires and about the same for wheels, okay? But again, that's $5 grand, okay? So I'm not going to get crazy into that because again, you want different wheels. You don't want to run bead locks. You want to run 42s, a different 40. They're all different. But we're going to start at the front. We're going to go to the back. So here we go. We're going to start with shocks, all right? So the shocks on this rig are Bilsteins. They're 14-inch travel. They're $100 a piece. So on the front end, we did $200 in shocks. Those shock towers obviously are not the factory original shock towers. They were $180 just for the front, okay? So you guys can add all this up on paper if you want. I've added it up and the number's kind of crazy, but here's where we're going to get to it. So steering, okay, on the front, the tie rod, drag link, and the high steer arms all cost $160 each. So that's $160 for the drag link, $160 for the tie rod, and $80 a piece, right? You had to do 2 for the high steer arms. Now that's not a lot of money because we just built them out of quarter wall DOM tubing and welded in bungs and put Heims into the ends of them, right? So $160 for your steering, and it's pretty stout, right? So pretty good price there. We also save money by going with a redneck Ram, right? From West Texas off-road. That kit is $1,200. It comes with a new hydraulic ported steering box that's already rebuilt. And it comes with the Ram and all the lines and all the mounts and all the fittings and all that kind of stuff. But when you remove your factory steering box and send it to them, they give you a $400 credit. So in order to put Hydro Assist on this rig, $800. Now, this Super Duty Dana 60 here, he actually was able to get, right? Centex Jeeper got that for a deal, right? It cost him $500. Deals can be had on Marketplace. Remember, these are today's prices, right? In over the winter of 2022 to 2023, with inflation, they're still available. There are deals out there, but a lot of them are closer to $1,000. So add that up however you want to do it. The diff cover on there, you can usually get those for about $200, depending upon where you shop for them. I think we wound up catching a deal. It cost us a tiny bit less, but figure about $200, maybe a little less. Now, when we get to hub assemblies, okay, we had to replace the hub assemblies on this axle because they were just destroyed. They were bad. Most people do it. Some can get away without it. It just depends on if you want to risk it or not. But the hub assemblies on the front were $492 for the pair, okay? We bought them from Moog, all right? Some other little odds and ends in there, like ball joints, things like that. We put new locking hubs in it, right, directly from Ford. Those were $355 for the pair. All right, so for gears, right, 538 gear master install kit, it was $389 for the ring and pinion, $240 for the master install kit. Then we also threw in the front, we have the Yukon Zip air locker, okay? Now that's a little bit expensive because not only is the air locker a little bit more money, you can see the fitting up at the top there, but that air locker, $1,255, right? Those are a little expensive, but then you have to buy an air compressor to run it. So the air compressor on that wound up being another $370. Now you can spend a lot more money on those air compressors, but we did it for $370 on this rig. Now the leaf springs on the rig, we're going to talk about that when we get to the back because I'm going to just tell you what all 4 of them cost because we bought 4 of the exact same leaf spring. And then obviously there was some steel in here for the front bumper, right? Because that's a custom front bumper that I made. We spent $300 in steel on this rig, okay? Some of that was the front bumper, some of that was the rear delete with the roll pan kind of deal that we made in the rear, maybe some random brackets and stuff like that that we made, but that essentially, right, gets you to the front end. Now there's some things we didn't talk about. Wheel speed sensors. We had to buy the cables with the new sensor to make the Ford work. Those were $85, right? So a little bit more money. We spent $45 in bolts, right? So a lot of stuff here, okay? And I'm not listing all of it necessarily in this video because it just gets monotonous, right? I will definitely list it all in the details section, so you can go down there and check it out on what the total cost was. So the rear, again, 14 bolt, right? So the axle itself, you're able to pick these up usually for less than $500. This one, Centex Jeeper happened to get for $350, right? So pretty good deal. And then again, I said earlier that we did the 13 bolt diff cover, which included just us cutting it with a Sawzall. You saw that in another one of my videos. That was $140 to shave it, right? So not a lot of money, and that included a new diff cover. So not too bad. Now, gears in the rear. The gears in the rear and the install kit are a little bit cheaper than that Dana 60, okay? So those gears in there, again, 538s, $300 in gears, $225 in a master install kit. And because we did the Grizzly locker, it was a little less than $500. It was closer to $400 for that rear Grizzly locker. Now, tone rings. The tone rings on a 14 bolt when you're doing a JK and you have all the electronics, you can see that in my video. I'm just gonna let you know what they cost. They're $40. They're not that expensive, but then you have to have the hubs machined down and that cost can vary. We did not spend a lot of money on the machining. We actually got a machine shop to do it. It wasn't that bad, but that can change. Usually they can charge you a couple $100 for that. The brakes in the rear, new calipers and rotors on both sides, that was $385. Spacers to convert it from the 14 bolt pattern, right, to the bolt pattern that matches the Dana 60. Those spacer adapters were $170. That also makes the rear almost as wide as the front, because the 14 bolt's slightly narrower too. So you're gonna need those regardless, right? Now the shackle mounts, all right? So you basically have, right, a mount in the front and the rear, plus the swing shackles on each side. So all of that stuff, right? Shackles, 2 sets of shackles for the rear, 2 sets for the front, the fixed mounts for the front and the rear, and an offset bracket in the front wound up costing $570, okay? But you got to remember that those offset brackets that I had made for the front were a little bit expensive at $270, all right? Now you could make them cheaper for sure, all right? So half that cost was essentially those funky brackets for the front. And again, you could make them for cheaper. It wouldn't cost you $270 in steel, but it's going to be a lot of time, and I just didn't have it. So we went with ones that were pre-made. It was a little bit more money. The leaf springs, okay? Because I said when we were talking about the front, all 4 leaf springs are rear leaf springs out of an 85 Grand Wagoneer. They were $1,100 in total. That includes tax and shipping, okay? So $1,100 for springs on all 4 corners, and then $100, so around $1,500 for springs and shocks on all 4 corners. Let's talk about war paint real quick. Now, all those numbers translate to war paint except the suspension, right? That's a little bit different. The suspension on war paint was more, okay? Because on this rig, we don't have track bars, right? You don't have a track bar bracket that you have to buy and mess with. On this rig, you don't have to worry about sway bars and changing links or positioning of your sway bars, right? You don't have to worry about that. So on this rig, all that stuff had to be done. Plus we have trusses, right? Now we did have a rear truss on this rig, which was cheap. It wasn't that expensive. It was like $180 or something. It wasn't that bad, but we had to do a front and rear truss on this, 3-link long arms, all those suspension brackets, a lot more DOM tubing. And that kit in today's money is $2,600 before tax, before it's shipped. So figure closer to $3 grand for the swap kit to put these axles in. We still haven't talked about, then you got to throw in all those wheels and tires, the drive shafts. You got to throw in the ring gear. You got to throw in the steering. You got to throw in all that stuff. So it's a little bit more expensive to do it this way, okay? In today's money, all in on building Maple Leaf the way you see it there, all in, not counting, okay, not counting the resale of what was on the rig before, the old wheels and tires, the old axles, things like that. It's 18 grand out of pocket, okay? 18 grand for 1-tons, 40s, the drive shafts, the brakes, everything else, the wheels, everything. Now 18 grand is a big number to a lot of people, okay, including us, all right? 18 grand is a lot of money. It's a big number. But after you sold everything else on that rig in today's money, we were able to build that rig for just under 10,000, okay? So we sold everything, the old wheels and tires, the old axles, the old drive shafts, the old suspension links, all that stuff for about 8 grand. And you're about 10 grand out of pocket. Now, 10 grand out of pocket. This morning, we met a guy here who bought a set of Ultimate Dana 60s for his JK and got a deal on them from someone that bought them and then didn't use them. In the crate, he got a deal on them for $17,700 and bolted them in. He didn't have new brakes, didn't have new wheels and tires, didn't have new drive shafts, didn't have new suspension. That's just the axles, okay? Didn't have an air compressor for him. None of that stuff was in there, and he spent almost the same amount of cash, and then we sold all that other stuff for the 8, right? Now, granted, he's gonna sell all that other stuff too, but he had to spend a lot more money. So the out-of-pocket at 10, let's think about some other builds and what you could do for 10 grand, right? Especially if you're paying a shop to install it. 10 grand, honestly, even if you're not paying a shop to install it, 10 grand gets you wheels and tires if you're doing 40s and beadlocks, and an Ultimate Dana 44. That's 10 grand, right? You still haven't touched your drive shafts, your suspension, your lockers, you haven't touched any of that stuff. You're an air compressor, and you've spent the same amount of money that we did on this, right, for all that stuff. So guys, $10,000, 14 inches of travel, okay, 1 tons, and everything's new. Pretty good deal. Now guys, if you have any questions about that rig, definitely reach out to me. You can find me on Instagram at warpaintjku. I respond to everybody. Sometimes it takes me a little time, but I do respond to everybody. And there you have it, okay? A little bit more money than I even thought it was gonna cost having built this rig. Guys, hit that like and subscribe button, share this video with your friends. If you're interested in doing a ton swap, it's gonna cost you some change, right? But if you have good stuff to sell, again, it's about as much as doing 40s and an Ultimate Dana 44, which I wouldn't recommend, right? But it's about the same thing. So get on over here, check it out.